The winter wind howled through the oil towns of Pennsylvania, carrying with it the acrid scent of kerosene and ambition. In the 1870s, oil was the blood of a new age, black gold that promised fortune to those who could tame it. But beneath the glimmer of prosperity, something darker flowed. Families were ruined overnight. Small refiners were crushed, and one name seemed to loom behind it all: John D. Rockefeller. Few dared to question his empire. Fewer still believed they could bring it down. But one woman did, and she wasn't a tycoon, a politician, or a man of power. She was a writer. Her name was Ida Minerva Tarbell. Ida was born on November 5 in 1857 in a small wooden house in Erie County, Pennsylvania. Her father, Franklin Tarbell, was a self-made man, an oil producer who built wooden storage tanks and dreamed big dreams. The family's fortunes rose with the oil boom. Titusville, their town, pulsed with opportunity, and Ida grew up among the noise of drills and the smell of crude oil. But then came the South Improvement Company, Rockefeller's shadowy creation, a secret alliance between Standard Oil and the railroads that gave him cheaper transportation rates and drove competitors to ruin. Ida was just a teenager when her father's business collapsed under the weight of Rockefeller's monopoly. She saw grown men cry, families lose everything, and honest enterprise replaced by ruthless manipulation. The memory would stay with her for life. In those early years, Ida had no thought of vengeance, only curiosity and a hunger for knowledge. She excelled in school, graduating from Allegheny College in 1880 as one of its few female students. She taught for a short while, but the classroom felt too small for her restless mind. So she began to write, first small pieces for local papers, then longer essays. Her words carried the sharpness of observation and the integrity of a scientist. In a time when women were expected to report on society teas and fashion, Ida wrote about ideas. In 1891, she took a bold leap. Leaving the safety of home, she boarded a ship for Paris with barely enough money to survive. It was an audacious move, a single woman in her 30s, alone in Europe, chasing a career that barely existed for women. She rented a cold attic room, lived on bread and coffee, and began writing for American magazines. Her breakthrough came when Samuel McClure, the charismatic founder of McClure's magazine, read her work and was captivated. He invited her to join his publication in New York. Ida returned to America and to history. At McClure's, she found her true calling: investigative journalism. She began with a biography of Napoleon, then Abraham Lincoln, meticulously researched and beautifully written. Readers devoured her serialized pieces, and McClure's became a sensation. But Ida's mind wandered back to her roots, to the oil fields of Pennsylvania, and the unanswered questions that haunted her family's past. Who was John D. Rockefeller really? How had he built his vast empire, and at what cost? When she proposed the idea of investigating Standard Oil, even McClure hesitated. Rockefeller was one of the richest men alive, untouchable, feared even by other industrialists. But Ida was undeterred. She once said, "I never had any question in my mind that I could do it." What followed was one of the most extraordinary feats in the history of journalism. For nearly 5 years, Tarbell dug through public records, court transcripts, and obscure shipping logs. She interviewed former Standard Oil employees and independent refiners who had been crushed by Rockefeller's tactics. She read thousands of documents by candlelight, piecing together a web of deceit that spanned states and decades. Her tone was calm, factual, but her evidence was devastating. When The History of the Standard Oil Company began appearing in McClure's magazine in 1902, it shocked America. Tarbell wrote not with anger, but with precision. She described Rockefeller as a man of relentless efficiency, a calculating strategist who wielded business as a weapon. She exposed secret rebates with railroads, predatory pricing, intimidation, a methodical conquest of an industry disguised as progress. Her prose was clear and almost clinical, but between the lines burned moral outrage. The series became a national sensation. Readers waited for each new installment as if following a serialized drama. Except this was real life, and its villain was the richest man in America. Rockefeller refused to respond publicly, but privately he called her Miss Tarbell. He ordered his associates never to mention her name in his presence. But he could not stop the tide she had started. Public opinion began to shift. Lawmakers took notice. And in 1911, nearly a decade after Tarbell's articles, the Supreme Court of the United States ordered the dissolution of Standard Oil under the Sherman Antitrust Act. Ida Tarbell never claimed personal credit for that victory. She saw herself not as a crusader, but as a historian revealing facts. "There is no man more dangerous," she wrote, "than the man who has made money his god." Her strength lay in restraint. She let evidence, not rhetoric, do the damage. Her influence reached beyond Rockefeller. Tarbell's work helped define the muckraking era, a golden age of journalism that sought to expose corruption in politics, business, and society. Alongside contemporaries like Lincoln Steffens and Upton Sinclair, she transformed journalism from gossip into a moral force. Yet Ida's life remained deeply private. She never married, choosing instead the companionship of ideas. She wrote books on business ethics, worked on commissions studying industrial relations, and even advised presidents on social reform. In her later years, Tarbell retreated to a farmhouse in Connecticut, where she wrote her autobiography, All in the Day's Work. Her health declined, but her mind remained sharp. She lived long enough to see the world transformed. Cars on the roads, radios in homes, new empires rising from steel and oil once again. And through it all, she remained steadfast in her belief that information, honestly gathered, clearly presented, was the bedrock of democracy. When she died in 1944 at the age of 86, her passing made only modest headlines, but her legacy had already outlived her. She had proven that truth, even when whispered by one determined voice, could shake the foundations of power. Ida Tarbell's life was not of spectacle, but of courage. The quiet, stubborn courage to confront the world's most powerful man armed with nothing but facts and conviction. She turned personal pain into public purpose, and in doing so, changed the way a nation understood capitalism, fairness, and the press. So, the next time you hear the phrase investigative journalism, think of that young woman in a Paris attic, scribbling by candlelight. Think of the oil fields of Pennsylvania and the girl who watched her father's dreams collapse and vowed to understand why. Think of the moment when one writer's pen proved mightier than Rockefeller's empire. That was Ida Tarbell's revolution, written not in fire or blood, but in ink.